Let's get right to the heart of the matter. At this moment, we and anybody else cannot snap our fingers and stop the radicalization of those who wish to kill in the name of religion. But there is a social media slice of this debate that must be at the forefront of our plans. The president claims to have a plan to stop the killers. But even after a primetime speech to the nation Sunday night, friends and foes are still trying to figure out why he wasted our time. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul weighs in. It's been a subtle warning for some time now, the role of women in the radical Muslim plan to attack and murder. And one American Republican female Muslim says the time is now for her people to admit it, then stand and fight. The political animal once again tears into the issue of assault weapons and why we need them in our homes. And I'm going to remind President Obama of today's date and why he should have taken a page from history before talking about war. The weekly battle for common sense begins. I'm Ed Berliner. This is The Hardline for Monday, December 7th, 2015.
As Commander-in-Chief, I have no greater responsibility than the security of the American people. As a father to two young daughters who are the most precious part of my life, I know that we see ourselves with friends and co-workers at a holiday party like the one in San Bernardino. I know we see our kids in the faces of the young people killed in Paris. And I know that after so much war, many Americans are asking whether we are confronted by a cancer that has no immediate cure.
One presidential candidate believes the answer to keeping America and the world safer from terrorists is to break up the carpet bombing strategy and start counting bodies. But the cockroach effect is in play with radical Islam. It will take being smarter to defeat these vermin. And that begins with understanding the role of social media, governments of the world, and why we cannot just bomb away radicalization of the weak-minded and the determined. So let's get to work. He's the Shillman Senior Fellow at the Investigative Project on Terrorism, former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, the author of Architects of Disaster. Let's welcome back Pete Hoekstra. We're joined by the Associate Dean from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, also leader of the Center's Digital Hate and Terrorism Program, Rabbi Abraham Cooper. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us. Pete, I'm going to begin with you. In 2011, the president promised a strategy to counter online radicalization. 4 years later, we're still waiting. Pete, do we have to admit to ourselves that even now we simply don't have a clue how to stop this? We are so far behind the curve on this that it's literally going to take us years to figure it out.
Well, it has taken us years to figure this out. Not only has this president promised in 2011 to have a strategy, but I held hearings in the Intelligence Committee back in 2005 and 2006 about how advanced at that time Al-Qaeda was in using social media and using the internet and those types of things. So it's not 4 years. This is closer to 11 years of us being behind the ball and not having a strategy. It's really a disaster in terms of making sure that we do everything to keep America secure.
Rabbi, I got to tell you, it is inconceivable to myself and so many other people that the greatest nation in the world, supposedly the one that has the greatest minds in the world, for as Pete said, over a decade, still can't grasp that here we have killers that are on Facebook, that are on Twitter, that are on Instagram. It's as if we have our head buried in the sand. How could we be so naive?
Well, the main focus for us has really not been about government so much because they're always way behind the curve, but to specifically call out the major companies, the social networking companies, and have them live up to their own rules and their own standards. They're actually the key to, if not eliminate, to degrade the unfortunately brilliant marketing plan in place that helps ISIS recruit, raise money, train terrorists to act on their own, and to denigrate and threaten their enemies. So the place really where we're focusing on and is to make sure that Twitter, YouTube, Facebook themselves enter this fray directly and start living up to their own rules of engagement and not wait for governments to come down and to make the demands. And we've had some progress, and maybe the San Bernardino killings will be a wake-up call. But we see the first two lines of defense beyond the military aspect, which is so critical, is to degrade their capabilities in social networking, and number two, to make sure that the voices from within the Muslim community begin to step up, including online and not just in front of cameras, and begin to change the narrative within the Muslim community. Otherwise, we're just going to see these problems proliferate.
Pete, the rabbi used what I think is a brilliant phrase where he said, brilliant marketing campaign. Let's be real honest here. There are so many Americans, including some in government right now, who I think still see them as nothing more than Bedouins in the desert. They have no idea about anything that's 20th century. They're buried in the 15th century. All right, Pete, come on. That's ridiculous on its face. We need to know more. We should know more. But to the rabbi's point then, how do we then get the American government, the French government, the British government to hammer down on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the rest and say, right now you're helping people die. And right now, you've got to do something about it, other than just a dictatorial edict here, Pete. What do we do?
Well, you've got to use the power of persuasion. The bottom line is that this president has not made a compelling case, either to the private sector or to the people that work for him in government, that we as a priority want to degrade this capability. Remember, listen to what they're saying. The Attorney General talking about our greatest concern is about Islamophobia. That is about, what we're doing here in the United States, rather than saying our primary concern here is about radicalization, the tools that ISIS, the tools that Al-Qaeda and other groups are using to radicalize Americans and to promote their propaganda. They're not even identifying it as a priority. That's the concern that we have here. It's still more about we are the problem rather than the problem is ISIS. We need to defeat them militarily, and we need to defeat them in this propaganda war. They're better, they're quicker, they're more responsive, and they have a better message than what we have.
Rabbi, Pete's so right. You've got to get on to people. You've got to get on to companies. You've got to shame them if you can. Do we need to just look in the eyes of, even though Facebook claims they're doing something about it, but look into the corporate eyes of these people and say, at the end of the day, it's obvious to the American people, all you care about is profits. If you stop worrying about the money that you're making more often and worried about what these people are able to do using your systems, then you should be ashamed of yourself and you need to do something right now. Maybe that's the way to go at it, Rabbi.
Well, 2 points. I was in Rome last week. I met with senior officials of the Italian government. Last Thursday, the ministries of interior of European countries did meet with the social networking companies in Brussels. They can't wait for the leadership from Washington. It's just not coming. And they are beginning to draw a straight line and saying, look, we have to keep our citizens safe. If we don't have your cooperation one way or the other, we're not going to be able to do that. So I believe that the companies are beginning to get the message directly from European countries, the ministries of interior and some of their politicians. We need that to be matched by our own leadership, starting with the President of the United States. My next meeting with YouTube in San Francisco is next Thursday. We'll continue to direct dialogue. I think we're seeing the beginning of a change. And if I have to call out one company for at least trying its best, it's been Facebook. And for the company that's done virtually nothing till now has been Twitter.
Pete, to you then, do we have to then look at these people? Well, let's start someplace else. Let's start with this president. Why is this president then, he has a Sunday night meeting, he holds this nationally televised primetime presser. Why doesn't he look in the eyes of the people from Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram and say, you're the problem, you need to change your ways, and as the president, I'm demanding that you do something? Why is he such a coward about this?
Well, he wouldn't think, obviously, that he is a coward. He doesn't have to go there because his strategy is working. What we heard last night, we didn't hear anything new in terms of evolving the strategy, the evolving threat, or anything like that. His view, the strategy is working. The narrative is, hey, we've got them contained, and these types of things. And so he doesn't have to make those hard calls and those hard decisions, either militarily or dealing with people in the United States, many of whom have been very, very strong supporters of his campaigns.
Rabbi, I got about 30 seconds left. After what you heard from the president on Sunday night, is there any doubt in your mind whatsoever that with his plan, at least what he's made public, We will not stop radicalization, and it will continue unabated.
I'm afraid that's the case. Even if we hit all of our marks militarily, he is right about one thing. This is not just a military conflict, but in order to win the war of ideas, you have to show up to the battlefield. We don't have that for the administration yet.
It's a stunning thing to think, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. We used to be the best nation in the world. We used to be the nation that would always be ahead of the game. And now we're so tragically behind, and people are dying, and a president who won't even admit it. That in itself, that just brings us to a time when we've got to look for some new answers here. Rabbi Abraham Cooper, Pete Hoekstra, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. Let's hope next time we meet, we have something positive to bring into this conversation. Thank you so much. And Rabbi, happy Hanukkah to you and your family. The call for Muslims in America to rise and protect themselves and their faith. It's being made by Muslims themselves in America. That's next on The Hard Line.